So in part one, we talked about how important story was. You really don't have a good offer these days until you first establish a story of how you've helped yourself or other people. Remember the analogy of the ladder? You're at the top of the ladder helping people who are at the bottom climb up. All the rungs of your ladder are what you do for people, how you help them. Part two, we talked about what happens if you don't have a story laying around, or after listening to part one, you're like, I still don't know what my story should be. How do I find it? How do I create it? We talked about all of the quick ways, the slower ways, the internal versus external. And then in part three, we talked about selecting the right offer for whatever you want the outcome of your business to be. What do you want your lifestyle to be? What kind of money? Not just I want money, but what kind of money? Do you want that money coming in every month? Do you want big spurts, big margin? How do you want to do that? How many people do you want to work with? All of that comes down to the type of offer that you have chosen. Today now, we got to drive traffic to this offer. What kind of traffic should we use? Is all traffic equal? No, it definitely is not. But for where you are at right now, what is the best kind of traffic? And this is one of the things that, again, I just don't think a lot of people are talking enough about, because when you log on to Facebook and you see all these Facebook ads, everyone is saying their traffic type is the best. And if you haven't been doing this for 17 years, like someone like me, you might believe that all traffic is equal and that a good traffic system is a good traffic system, and that it's just a matter of picking something. And when you believe that, or if that's what you've been convinced to believe, then it's very difficult to navigate what's actually right for you and your business. And even worse, that kind of mentality of thinking it's all equal and the same is what can lead to shiny object syndrome, right? Because if you're familiar with the Kelly and O'Connor emotional cycle of change, when you don't really know yet, you're in what's called uninformed optimism. You're like, hey, it all looks great. And then you try it, and then it doesn't really work the first day because things are hard and you have to like practice and try things, and there's failure along the way. And so you get into this thing called uninformed pessimism, where you're like, okay, none of it works. And so you're looking for the next thing. And because you're uninformed, everything else looks amazing. But what you really have to do is be able to push through that, called the valley or the trough of disillusionment. And then you can get into what's called informed optimism, where you're like, okay, I know what the real deal is now. I know what's actually going on, so I can make better choices, I can stick with it, etc. So I'm going to try to help you to get to informed optimism as much as I can in today's episode about traffic. And this will be true for the rest of your career. It doesn't matter what the latest trend is. It doesn't matter who's saying what guru is speaking on the microphone the loudest. This will always be true. Has been true for 17 years, will be true for another 17. The short version of today's episode is that the newer you and your offer is, the warmer your traffic needs to be. Period, full stop. There is no trick. There's no exception. Don't believe what people are telling you about how this is finally the breakthrough push button system you've been looking for. The newer you are, meaning the less skilled you are in things like marketing and selling and fulfillment and all that type of stuff, it will be, I can't even describe to you how important it is that you rely more on warm traffic rather than colder traffic. It's not even to say that you're stacking the odds in your favor if you use warm traffic is still underselling the importance of. That also includes the less you want to sell, the less you want to do marketing. Relying on warmer traffic is absolutely where you should be focusing your efforts on. And we'll talk about what is warm traffic, what is cold traffic, really. And the newer your offer is. So even if you're quite experienced, if you're trying a new offer, it is foolish to run that to cold immediately. It will be the most expensive way to get your offer to sell. Whatever the offer is, low ticket, high ticket, mid ticket, whatever. Now, so let me say this one more time and then give you a big old caveat. The newer you and your offer is, so if you're new and you're trying to sell a new offer, you really need to be really only focusing on warm traffic. But the newer you and your offer is, the warmer the traffic needs to be. And here's the big caveat: to minimize risk. Okay, to minimize risk. So we've done all this work. We got our story, we've got our offer. Now we want to go out and do something with it. We want to go turn into a business. If you take a look at your own risk profile, how much you're able to lose, not just in terms of money, but in terms of time and effort and just psychological well-being. If you are super risk averse, you're like, I need this to work, otherwise I'm going to break and crumble if it doesn't, just mentally. If you know that, then great. You need to be as far into the warm traffic. Don't even worry about cold traffic right now. You need to be talking about and thinking about warm traffic. Okay. Otherwise, the newer you and your offer is, the more you go into cold, the higher the risk is that it won't work. Now, I'm not new, but even when I do new offers, I try to test it out warm first before I'm rolling it out to any type of cold traffic situation. But even when I roll it out to cold traffic, I'm fully aware that my ability to risk is significantly higher than most people. One, simply because I'm used to it, right? I've conditioned my brain, my mindset to accept risk. And if you've never taken big risk before in your life, it is different than when you have taken a bunch of risk over time. It's a completely different experience. You make different decisions. Like somebody who has taken a lot of risk in their life versus somebody who hasn't, they are two different people. One isn't better or worse. One is just more experienced in taking risk. And they're able to operate in that environment a lot more differently. It's the same, like I think about kitchens, right? Day one, some kid walks in for the first time in a kitchen, very different than somebody who's been in a kitchen for 20 years. Like Gordon Ramsay, how he operates, how he feels about stress, his abilities or inability is very different than the kid walking on the line for the first time. And that's true in every single career. It's obvious to us in all other careers. Of course, the new person isn't the same as the person who's been experienced, yet somehow in entrepreneurship, we expect that somebody who's never taken risk before is somehow going to be as good as somebody who has taken lots of risk before. That's silly. That's silly. It's unrealistic. It's romanticizing entrepreneurship, which is a big pet peeve of mine, which you're probably going to hear a lot of as I make more and more content these days. But anyways, so the point is, even I know that when I'm running stuff to cold, I have a bigger risk profile. So I might do things cold sooner than somebody who doesn't have as big of a risk profile. I have access to more funds. I've been doing this a long time. If something fails, I'm just like, oh, it failed. I'm on to the next thing. That's not a magic power. It's that I've been failing for 17 years. It's not a big deal to me anymore, right? And you'll get that way as well as you progress in this entrepreneurship thing also. Okay, so the newer you and your offer is, the warmer the traffic needs to be. So what the heck is warm traffic? Warm traffic very much is easy mode. Okay, let's be real. Anything that is warm is easy. So if you're looking for easy, that's what you need to be focused on. Another way to think about warm is that it requires very little upfront in order to access the traffic. Because what is traffic? It's just human beings looking at your thing, whatever you have to offer. Specifically, it's going to be human beings looking at the story you have and the offers you've created to help people climb up that ladder. The more human beings who see that, and the more compelling your story is and your offers, the more money you make. Okay? So more human beings taking a look at really cool, compelling stuff equals making lots of money. The easiest way to access a bunch of human beings that are pre-sold, this is very important, that are pre-sold, they are warm to the idea of what you have for sale. The easiest way to do that is through warm traffic. So things like being interviewed on podcasts. Okay, all you have to do is send out some emails to get booked on podcasts. You show up for the podcast, you be your amazing self. What do you talk about? You talk about your story. You can talk about your offers. A lot of podcast hosts will let you do a call to action, say, visit me at www.mystuffisawesome.com/book or whatever, and I'll help you and whatever. So that's a podcast interview. It takes no money, little bit of manual effort, and someone else has already gathered the people, right? The podcast audience is the group of people who now, through the interview, will get to hear about your story and your stuff. And the cool thing about podcast interviews is you don't even have to make the content. You show up and the podcast host makes the content for you by asking you a bunch of questions, and you respond and that kind of thing. And they'll even set it up. They'll put it on a platform, and then you can link to it if you is amazing. It's why in our foundations program, this is one of the big things we help people with in foundations. It's if you want to tap in to, we get people on podcasts like showing up. Like I'm thinking of a specific example recently, like we can get people on a podcast every day. Now your mileage may vary. You have to put in a little bit of effort, but that's how straightforward and easy podcasting is. It's not, oh, is my ad going to work? It's not, do I have the budget to spend this much on ads, or what's the secret marketing trick to getting on podcasts? No, there's tons of hosts, there's tons of podcasts. If you know how to get on them, which is a really simple process, it's just a matter of sitting down, doing the work, sending out this, doing this, the whole process we have in foundations, and it'll get on podcasts. And then you have these podcasts are permanent. They're out there in the world for a very long time. You can link to them. Other people will link to them. If you have a really good podcast, it can go viral, traffic, etc. Right? That is as easy as it gets. It doesn't get easier than that. Okay. If anyone tells you that, what I'm telling you is it does not get easier. That's about as easy of a business as you can run, is your traffic source being podcasts. Because the people who hear about you on the podcast and then go see your stuff, they've already spent 20, 30 minutes with you listening to the podcast. They are pre-warmed up. They're not a total random stranger on the internet who's never heard anything about you. They already know your story because you talked about it on the podcast interview, etc. So that's an example of warm traffic and why warm is easy mode. Another one is getting partners. So doing deals with other companies to say, hey, let's say, for example, I'm an apple farmer and I sell apples. I might go to the orange farmer and say, hey, you sell oranges. If anyone comes to you and says, hey, do you also sell apples? Just send them my way. Let's be a partner in this. And if anyone is looking for oranges, I'll send them your way, right? That would be like a partnership type of situation. It's not a partnership like they own part of your company. It's a strategic selling. Some people call it an alliance or a partnership, but the point is that you're sending each other business. Now, this is a little bit harder to do than a podcast interview because first off, you have to convince a business owner that you're worth sending to. Then you might have to set up, say, for example, referral fees and et cetera, et cetera. So it's not the easiest traffic ever, but it sure is easy to sell from because you've been given basically a reference. Like somebody's, hey, I will refer you to this apple farmer because their apples are awesome. And so the person that's now coming to my apple farm is, I heard you had amazing apples. Wow, that's called endorsed traffic. That's pretty powerful. And guess how much it cost me? Either nothing or a little bit of a referral fee after I close the sale. So this is easy mode type stuff. It still takes work. It takes effort. Making these relationships is not easy. It doesn't just fall from the sky. This is another thing that we help people do in the Foundations program. Set up these partnerships. If you're very smart about it, you can set up enough partnerships that your partnership income is consistent. So you have so many different partners. Let's say one person sends you one month and then one 3 months later. But let's say you have 10 people doing that, and it all turns out to be, on average, every month you're getting 2 referrals from these partners. And speaking of referrals, one of the best partners to have in a selling relationship are your current clients and customers. So this can be affiliates or referrals, depending on the price point. So if it's a low ticket, you typically call these individuals affiliates. There's automated ways to set that up. If it's higher ticket, you're looking at referrals. So people you've already helped, served, loved on, they love you. They'll absolutely endorse you. They have friends. They'll send it to you. An amazing partner to have. It doesn't have to just be other businesses. Again, in our Foundations program, that's a huge part of what we do, is help you to set up consistent referrals. One of the easiest ways to double a business, assuming the business exists and it's doing business, so it's taking customers, it's taking clients. One of the easiest ways to double a business without doing any additional marketing and selling is to establish a strong and consistent referral system. In my humble but accurate opinion, a business should have 50% of its revenues should come from referrals of some kind. Not a constant reliance on paid traffic or VSLs or even low ticket funnels. 50% of, because what does that mean if 50% of the traffic, sorry, not the traffic, but 50% of the revenue from your business is coming from referrals? It means that your business is doing such a good job of taking care of its customers that your customers are now becoming salespeople for you. And that's a big thing that we do in Foundations. I highly recommend, if you have not spent time setting up a referral system, that would be a very smart thing to do this year. A very smart thing. Okay, and then lastly, one of the methods that we teach is just cold email. The problem is that cold email or cold outreach is just mentally taxing. It is a tremendous amount of rejection. And I actually don't agree with a lot of people who say that cold outreach works for every single business. I do actually think there are some businesses in which cold outreach is pretty futile, especially when you compare it to other modes of traffic getting, attention getting, eyeball getting, like podcast interviews, partnerships, referrals, things like that. But I do want to mention that because that's not necessarily warm traffic. It's definitely in between warm and cold, but it is easy to implement. Meaning, once you figure out how to send some cold emails, it's just a matter of sitting down and doing it. It's not the same as, for example, let's talk about cold traffic now, which is pretty much paid traffic. Okay. So paid traffic is hard, but incredibly fast. It has much higher risk involved, which means you do need to have some ability to absorb that risk. One way to absorb that risk is to have a low ticket funnel, so that even if your paid traffic isn't great and your skills aren't great, you can at least offset some of that risk by getting people to buy a book or buy a low ticket course. And in doing so, at least you got a customer, which a customer is 16 times more likely to buy than somebody who's just freebie seeking information. So if anyone listens to this podcast episode and they are not a customer of ours, they are 16 times less likely to purchase from us than somebody who has. And so those are really your options. If your offer, so when we work with clients, what we like to do, and not just because this is the business that we're running, but this is what I prefer to do to help people, is that if you are new and newer, so you are new and your offer is new, then your focus ought to be really getting that story nailed down, really getting the offer nailed down, and then focusing on warm traffic that's really natural for you to do. Maybe you prefer the partnership model or referrals or podcast interviews. That's what I would recommend that you start doing. Then once that business is going, minimum of $5, $10, $15, $20,000 a month, then you can start worrying about paid traffic. Then you can toss in a low ticket funnel and scale what you know now works, because you did it the low risk, easier way. And now you can start really turning on the jets, or whatever analogy you want to use. Now, that's my personal preference. And that's because I run a company called Peaceful Profits. It's one of the companies I run. You can ignore everything I just said and just go straight to paid traffic. That's not wrong. You just have to be prepared for the risk profile that comes along with that particular strategy. You must be prepared. For example, let's say that you're running a webinar. Okay, fantastic. Those work. Okay, I'm not one of the guys out here that's like, only my method works. No, it all works. But you just have to understand the consequences of approaching something like that. And let's say that you're new and newer, your offer is new, you are new, and you want to try and scale your brand new offer with your current sales skills and ability, current marketing sales and ability, and you want to use paid traffic to a webinar. Fantastic. I promise you, you're going to blow through some money. To learn how to do that method, either you're going to have to learn how to sell better on the phone, because maybe it's a webinar to a phone call, or you're going to have to learn how to market better. So maybe you need to get way better at creating hooks and writing sales presentations and doing all this stuff. And that's going to take time. And you'll be spending ad money as you do it, and et cetera, et cetera. So this is not an episode about only certain traffic methods work. They all work. What you have to do is, what's the title of this episode? Is pick the right traffic for you and your offer. And most specifically, when we say pick the right traffic for you, what is your risk profile? What can you sustain to get this thing proven? Then, once it's proven and you're making money, do not wait. Don't walk, run to paid traffic. I recommend that you run towards low ticket paid traffic. That's my recommendation to you, because it will offset some of the costs of paid traffic. So it still keeps your risk profile low. Again, the reason we call ourselves Peaceful Profits is because I'm like, there's a stressful way to run business and there's non-stressful ways to run business. I recommend doing the non-stressful ways. But that is the journey, the arc, the A to B that I run all my clients through these days, because it's just the healthier way to grow a business. Now, one of the questions that I get asked a lot is, what about content? Where does content fall in all of this? With referrals and partners, you don't need content, because it's all about the relationship that you have, either with another business that's sending you stuff or with the referral, your customer, your client. They don't need like a bunch of content. That you just need to have the agreement and the relationship. Podcast interviews is the content. You getting on the podcast, those people interviewing you is the content. You may say, what about things like posting on YouTube a bunch or running LinkedIn or things like that? Now, this is the sort of exception to everything that I've said. So if you are going to do TikTok, YouTube organic, LinkedIn organic, Facebook organic, or anything like that. It absolutely works. Again, it all works. However, it is slower than referrals and partners. It's slower than podcast interviews, because if you're tapping into existing audiences and relationships, you don't have to wait to build it from scratch. So all these organic, they're slower, and there is a very real point that needs to be made by these people selling these methods, which I don't think is always made, and that is you need to be good. So organic content, as much as we want it to be beginner friendly, is not. When you put bad content up, it goes nowhere in today's very crowded, very noisy world. It used to be, say 10 years ago maybe, it used to be if you could just consistently post to something, wow, you could get some eyeballs. But now you have to be good. So let me make this sort of change to my original statement. My original statement was the newer you and your offer is, the warmer the traffic needs to be. Warm traffic is easy mode, podcast interviews, partners, etc. I'll say this one thing. If you yourself are an expert, so maybe you're new to this business of coaching, consulting, done for you services, but you're not new to talking about what you do. I think of a lot of our clients who are like attorneys, been attorneys for 15, 20 years, and now they want to start doing courses and coaching, or health professionals. They've been helping people with heart problems for 10, 15 years, and now they're wanting to go into this world. You may have an unfair advantage in organic traffic, but having expertise is not the only thing that makes organic traffic work. You also have to have showmanship and presentation skills and the ability to be that person. And when that person, I very much mean to get any reasonable amount of organic traffic through your business in which you are able to produce a significant amount of revenue. You have to have not just expertise in your content, but be a good content creator, which by definition means if you've never done it before, there is a learning curve, and that learning curve takes time. And it takes a lot of time with organic because the feedback that you need to improve comes from putting your content in front of a lot of people, and then a lot of people either loving it or hating it. What happens when you start with organic? You don't have a lot of people in your audience. So my general recommendation for organic, to be frank, and I know this flies in the face of what a lot of people recommend, if you're going to be relying on like a YouTube organic method or a TikTok method or et cetera, my recommendation is actually that you try some of these other easier traffic sources first, get some referrals coming in, get some podcast interviews coming in, then add organic content once you have a big enough audience that you can get the feedback you need fast enough so you can improve, so that your organic content is good enough for you to then actually be able to turn it into something. The biggest waste of time, in my opinion, is producing organic content as a beginner to an empty room. That's not a good idea. I don't recommend that at all. There's one exception to everything I just said now, which is LinkedIn. LinkedIn allows you to produce an audience. All you have to do is go make connections. So if you have LinkedIn and you're thinking about organic, you can go make an audience of people who are connected to you by just going and manually making connections. And you'll get enough people over time. There are connection limits. There's enough people over time that you can then start producing content on LinkedIn organically, and at least you have some connections. You have an audience that can give you the feedback you need to then be able to produce content. And the other use, and this is how I personally use content these days, is on the back of paid traffic. So I'm not really a proponent of running ads to organic content. I would prefer to just run ads to a book, which by the way is content. You just ask people to pay you for it, or to like a low ticket course, which again is content. You just ask people to pay you for it. So you can offset some of those ads. But I'm not a real big fan of the strategies where it's like, pay to run a video you made on $5 a day. Again, it just comes back to being good at content and all these sorts of things. And also, if I'm going to spend money, I want to at least try and offset that money. A buyer is 16 times more likely to do anything anyways. Why am I running traffic to a bunch of free stuff? So that's my philosophy, but that's because I'm old and grouchy and I've been doing this for a really long time. But content is incredibly helpful at taking those book buyers and further convincing them to buy something from you. So using content as a bridge between, hey, I just bought your book, I loved it, and now, oh my gosh, I want to work with you and pay you a lot of money. That is the role that content plays in what I'm doing. If some of that content gets shared and it brings in new people to our world, cool. That's a side benefit I don't even care about, to be completely honest with you. It's not something I'm focusing on because it'll happen if it happens. And if not, that's okay. The primary goal wasn't for that anyways. It was to convince people who had already given me money to give me some more money. That's the whole point of this whole series that we've been doing, this $1 million offer. I'm only doing it for my list of buyers in the hopes that someone somewhere heard something that makes them say, okay, I'm ready to work with this guy now. That's all. That's why this exists. It's not to go blow up our YouTube channel or try to get traffic or anything like that, because I don't really want freebie traffic anyways. That's not my focus. I'll take it if it comes, wonderful, but I'm not going to purposely go out of my way to make it happen. And that's how you run peaceful profits. One of the most important things you can do in business is learn how to say no. And there's a lot of stuff to chase, and there's a lot of very noisy people telling you to chase all sorts of different things. But once you really dial it down and say, what am I doing here? What exactly is the point of all this effort? Like, why am I not just outside having fun and doing my hobbies and doing this instead? We all have finite time in life, so we got to be very careful about applying that limited time to the things that will actually move us forward. The way that I think about it is, if you're new and your offer is new, it's best to focus on podcasts and partners. You can add content later if you'd like, but it's really only best to do if you have an audience. Otherwise, podcasting is other people helping you to get content and putting you in front of existing audiences. 2 birds, 1 stone, that kind of thing. Then once that is established, then you can start worrying about cold. Now let's start getting paid traffic. I recommend with paid traffic that you offset some of that paid traffic. It just makes life easier. And that's it. And everything that we've just talked about over the past 4 parts of this little mini series thing that we've done, this is how you scale anything. Yes, we got to add on operations if you build a big team, and you got to figure out like how to get things. There's little nuances here and there, but this is it. This is the master plan. When you start to deviate from all of this, so get a story first, make your offer. If you don't know how to do that, there's 2 ways you can figure out how to do that. Internal, external. Figure out what offers you want based off of the dreams that you have about what your business is going to do for you, and then pick the right traffic for where you are at right now in your business. And that may change over time. You might do podcasting now and then cold traffic later. Or maybe your business already at a point where you're ready to start tapping into cold traffic. Fantastic. You do those things, and anytime you start getting away from that and you start focusing on other things, you now know that you're going on an unnecessary side mission. You're taking the trail that isn't going to take you to where you want to go, and you're going to have to come back to this anyways. Like this stuff, everything we just described, you will not unlock money until you do this stuff. So any kind of procrastination or trying to find a shortcut or trying to do something else, that's just wasted time, because this has to get done anyways. You have to have a story, you have to have an offer, you have to have offers that make sense for what you're trying to do, and you have to have traffic that makes sense for your risk profile. That those have to happen. And so hopefully what we've been able to accomplish in our time together with this little series here of how I create $1 million offers is that you have a plan for what to do next. Now, if you would like help with any of this, if you'd like a lot more training, if you would get some feedback, if you'd like to get some ideas, if you want templates, tools, all sorts of different ways we can help. We have done for you solutions even. Reach out to us, peacefulprofits.com/call. We would love to help you with any of this stuff. The beautiful thing about this business is that this is all it takes. And if you do it well and do it in integrity, there's a lot of opportunities here to do it in the gray zone. And it's one of my biggest pet peeves in this whole industry, because it makes it harder for everybody else who's trying to do it right to sell, because people get jaded, they buy something, it didn't work out, that thing. And if you do it with integrity, this is one of those rare industries where, to be frank, you can get a lot more out of it than you put in. And that's just the reality of it. The amount of money you can make is pretty flabbergasting, to be honest, compared to a restaurant, right? They operate on razor thin margins and you're working 90 hours a week hoping that you break even. That's not what this industry is. You can make massive margins, 40, 50, 60% margins on a 7-figure business. It's really wild. But even more important than all of that, the work you get to do. So I'm going to take it all the way back to part 1 of our series here. If you're up at the top of this ladder and you're helping people up the ladder, and you have something interesting to help people up to, like your story is pretty cool, it is very difficult to find that kind of satisfaction and feeling of impact anywhere else. And I've had several companies over the years. I've done all sorts of different things, and I've not found that sense of impact in any of those other industries. So this is a really special thing. None of what I said is easy, but it is all incredibly simple. It takes a lot of work in that gray matter in between your ears. It takes a lot of mindset stuff, and you're going to fail, and it's going to be hard, and you're going to have to try again, and then you're going to think you got it, and then something will change. You're like, oh no, I got to figure. All of that is real. Don't let anyone tell you anything different. I hate when people over romanticize entrepreneurship. It is difficult, but it is very doable, and the rewards are immense. So if you want help with any of that, peacefulprofits.com/call. Have a chat with our team. Otherwise, I hope you have enjoyed this series. We've got a lot more content coming down the pipeline for our customers. I have some free time. I enjoy doing this. It does help our sales. And so I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you around.